Hi class and welcome to chapter 19 on the reproductive system. We just have two more chapters to go through before the end of this semester. So the human species could not survive without the functional male and female reproductive systems. They play essential roles in the development of the structural and functional differences between males and females, also influencing human behavior and producing offspring. However, a reproductive system, unlike other organ systems, is not necessary for the survival of the actual individual human. And the main functions of the reproductive system are to produce gametes, fertilization, development, and nourishment of a new individual, and the production of reproductive hormones. So here are the major reproductive organs in the male and the female. We'll go over them both in detail. But we need to talk about the difference between gametes and gonads, and we'll talk about what gametes are first of all. Gametes are the sex cells. They are sperm in the males and oocytes, or eggs, in the females. They will divide by meiosis, which is a special type of cell division that leads to their formation. Each sperm cell and each oocyte will contain 23 chromosomes, which is half the normal amount of chromosomes, so that when they combine, a complete fused cell and oocyte will have a complete 46 chromosome set. So we'll talk about meiosis then. Before meiosis begins, all the chromosomes are duplicated. And again, meiosis is what will lead to the production of these gametes, whether they're egg or sperm. At the beginning of meiosis, each of the 46 chromosomes consist of two chromatids connected by a centromere. The chromosomes will align as pairs in a process called synapsis. And because each chromosome consists of two chromatids, the pairing of the chromosomes brings the two chromatids of each chromosome close together. Genetic material is exchanged on occasion when a part of a chromatid of one chromosome will break off and will be exchanged with a part of another chromatid from the other chromosome. And we call this process crossing over, where genetic material is exchanged. Meiosis 1 produces two cells, each having 23 chromosomes, composed of two chromatids joined at a centromere. And during meiosis 2, each of the two cells will divide into two more cells. The centromere will break, giving separate chromosomes. And the final result from meiosis are four cells, each having 23 chromosomes. And since the number of chromosomes are reduced during the process of dividing into four cells, the process is a reduction division process. So this just takes us through the steps of meiosis. And again, the goal is to create kind of four separate haploid cells, each genetically different and unique. From fertilization to fetus, fertilization is the union of the sperm and the oocyte. A zygote is what develops after fertilization. It will develop into an embryo 3 to 14 days after fertilization. An embryo is what we call the zygote at 14 to 56 days. And at 56 days after fertilization, we call it a fetus. The male reproductive system consists of the testes, a series of ducts, the accessory glands, and all the supporting structures. The ducts will include the epididymis, the ductus deferens, and the urethra. The accessory glands include seminal vesicles, prostate glands, and bulbourethral glands. And the supporting structures include the scrotum and the penis. And here's a look at the male reproductive structures. This is a medial section, so if we cut kind of in a sagittal plane, here we have the bladder with the ureter bringing urine into the bladder. Here's the prostate gland. It sits right below the bladder. The scrotum holds the testes outside of the body, and that's important because sperm, in order for them to fully develop and mature, need to be held at a couple degrees cooler than normal body temperature. So that's why testes are held outside of the body. The ductus deferens brings the sperm up and around through the seminal vesicle, through the prostate gland and the ejaculatory duct, and then eventually meet up with the prostatic urethra to join out with the urethra that exits both urine and sperm out of the body. The scrotum contains the testes. It contains a dartus muscle that moves the scrotum and testes close to and away from the body depending on the temperature. And again, the scrotum contains the testes because sperm must develop at a temperature a couple degrees less Celsius than normal body temperature. The testes produce sperm, they're in the scrotum, they contain the seminiferous tubules, and that's the specific location where sperm are produced. They contain interstitial cells, which secrete testosterone. They contain germ cells that sperm cells will arise from, and they contain sustentacular cells, which will nourish the germ cells and produce the hormones. The epididymis is the thread-like tubules on each side of the testes. This is where your seminiferous tubules will empty the new sperm, and the new sperm will continue to mature and develop the ability to swim and bind to oocytes in the epididymis. The ductus deferens, also known as the vas deferens, this will extend from the epididymis to join the seminal vesicle that sits kind of behind the bladder. This was what is cut during a vasectomy. And then the urethra extends from the bladder to the end of the penis. This is the passageway for both urine and male reproductive fluids. That's a big thing, how males and females are different. Males have one kind of exiting for urine and sperm, and females there are two. Okay, so here are the three columns of erectile tissue which fill blood for erection in the penis to help transfer sperm from the male to the female. It also excretes the urine. Those are the three different columns. The seminal vesicles are next to the ductus deferens. They will help form the ejaculatory duct. The prostate gland surrounds the urethra. It's about the size of a walnut. It sits right below the bladder. And the bulbourethral gland are two small mucus-secreting glands near the base of the prostate gland. And you can see those here, seminal vesicles, prostate gland, and bulbourethral gland. They both will secrete extra fluid to help nourish the sperm to kind of help on its way to eventually, if they have to fertilize an egg. This is a look, this is a kind of a better picture showing the duct system and how everything's connected together. So here's the scrotum with the testes, the epididymis, and then the vas deferens, which travels up and around the bladder. And just had an interruption from my daughter. You can go down there. Okay, thanks for that. And then you can see here the urethra comes out through the prostate and then out through the penis. This is a look at the kind of the three erectile tissue columns, the corpora cavernosa, which takes up the majority part, the corposa spongiosum, and then the spongy urethrum that goes through it. So kind of these three different columns. Semen then is the mixture of sperm and secretions from glands. It provides a transport medium and nutrients that will protect and activate sperm. 60% of the fluid is from seminal vesicles, 30% of the fluid is from the prostate gland, 5% of the fluid is from your bulbourethral gland and from the testes. The seminal vesicles, which will provide fructose, which contain prostaglandins that decrease mucus thickness around the surface and the uterine tubes to help the sperm move through the female reproductive tract. It will also contain coagulants that help deliver semen into the female. The prostate gland contains enzymes to help liquefy the semen after it is inside the female, also helps to neutralize the acidity of the vagina, and the bulbourethral gland will help to neutralize the acidity of the male urethra and the female vagina. Testicular secretions include sperm and that extra small amount of fluid. About 2 to 5 milliliters of semen is ejaculated each time, and one single milliliter of semen contains 100 million sperm, which is a crazy amount. Sperm can live for 72 hours once inside the female, which is good to know. The sperm develop in the seminiferous tubules in the testes. So here's the path of sperm that they go through. They will then travel through the epididymis, where they will wait until they're fully mature. They'll travel through the ductus or vas deferens. They'll receive extra secretions kind of to help them on their journey from those three glands. And then they will exit in the urethra. Spermatogenesis is the formation of sperm cells that begins at puberty. Interstitial cells will increase in number and size. Seminiferous tubules enlarge, and seminiferous tubules produce germ cells and sustentacular cells. So here's the production of sperm cells and kind of the order that they go on, starting with germ cells and ending eventually to sperm cells, and every kind of stage in their production. This takes you through that spermatogenesis, the stage of each sperm cell production. I'll let you guys read through this on your own. Again, starting from a kind of a germ cell and eventually getting into a sperm cell with a tail that has the ability to move. A sperm cell structure has a head, which contains the nucleus, DNA, the midpiece contains the mitochondria, and the tail contains the flagellum. And here's just a look again at how sperm will be produced in the seminiferous tubules. And you can see a cross section of the seminiferous tubule here with the different types of cells that will lead to the sperm cells. Then they will travel through the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, where they will sit and mature and eventually exit out of the spermatic cord via the ductus deferens. And here's a look at the structure of a sperm cell. The acrosome contains enzymes to help get through the layer in the oocyte or the egg. You can see the nucleus and then the mitochondria to help provide a lot of energy for movement in the tail. Again, the sperm cell is the only cell in the body, the human body, that has a flagellum or a tail. Gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH, is produced in the hypothalamus and stimulates luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. This will begin at puberty. LH is produced in your anterior pituitary gland and stimulates secretion of testosterone. And FSH is produced in the anterior pituitary to promote spermatogenesis, to promote the formation of follicles or sperm cells. Testosterone is produced in the interstitial cells in the testes and is involved in development and maintenance of reproductive organs. Inhibin is secreted by cells of the seminiferous tubules and inhibits FSH secretion. And here's just a look at male reproduction and regulation of their reproductive hormones. And you can kind of takes you through GnRH controls the secretion of LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary and what they each do. Male puberty will begin at 12 to 14 and ends around 18. When this will start when a boy begins to produce male hormones and sperm cells. Testosterone is the major male hormone, and secondary sexual characteristics develop because of that testosterone. Skin texture, fat distribution, hair growth in different locations, the face, skeletal muscle growth, and also the larynx changes, which will help to lower the voice. The male sex act is a complex series of reflexes that result in erection, secretion of mucus, emission, and ejaculation. And you guys can read through. The emission is the movement of all the sperm cells, fluid out of the urethra, and then the ejaculation is the forceful expulsion of the secretions that have accumulated in the urethra, eventually to the exterior. Sensations normally interpreted as pleasurable. This is known as an orgasm. A phase called resolution occurs after ejaculation, which the penis becomes flaccid. Satisfaction exists, and the male is unable to achieve erection and a second ejaculation. Erection is the first major component. This is neural stimuli will cause the penis to enlarge and become firm. Parasympathetic action, potentials from the sacral region cause the arteries that supply blood to the erectile tissues to dilate, and blood then fills all the venous sinuses called sinusoids in the erectile tissue to compress the veins, which reduces blood flow from the penis. Ejaculation then results from the contraction of smooth muscle in the wall of the urethra. Action potentials are sent to the skeletal muscles that surround the base of the penis right before. Rhythmic contractions are produced that force the semen out. In addition, muscle tension increases throughout the body. Moving on to the female reproductive, which is a little more complex. The female reproductive organ consists of all the ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, vagina, external genitalia, and the mammary glands. The internal reproductive organs of the female are located within the pelvis, between the urinary bladder and the rectum. So unlike the male, where urine and semen exits one urethra, in the female, urine exits out of the urethral orifice. The egg and a potential baby would exit out of the vagina. So we have kind of one extra tract in the female reproductive system. Here's the uterus where a potential fetus would grow and develop. Um, you can see here the uterus lies right on top of the urinary bladder. So in pregnancy, pregnant women have to pee all the time because their baby, especially as it grows larger, is always pushing down on their bladder. Here, the uterine tube is what connects the uterus to the ovary where the eggs will be released. Another look at the female reproductive tract, the different parts of the uterus itself, and how the uterus is kind of held in the abdominal or the lower pelvic cavity with a broad ligament. And the suspensory ligaments hold on to kind of the uterine tube and the ovary. The uterine tube will be the normal site of fertilization. So sperm will swim all the way up into the uterine tube. And this is normally where a fertilization will occur. If the fertilization of the egg and sperm doesn't reach the uterus, but instead implants in the uterine tube wall, that's called an ectopic pregnancy. And usually the baby is aborted naturally. Okay, so the ovaries, primary female reproductive organ that produce oocytes and sex hormones. You have one on either side of the uterus. The ovarian ligaments anchor the ovaries to the uterus. Suspensory ligaments anchor ovaries to the pelvic cavity, and the ovarian follicle are the cells in the ovaries that contain oocytes. Here's the structure of the ovary and the ovarian follicles. You can see how kind of similarly to spermatogenesis, oogenesis starts with primordial follicles, primary oocytes, and eventually kind of mature into a mature egg or an oocyte. The uterine, also known as fallopian tubes, it's the part of the uterus which extends toward the ovaries and receives the oocytes. Fimbriae are fringe-like structures around the opening of the uterine tubes that help sweep the oocyte into them. And tubal ligation, so getting your tubes tied or cut, causes sterilization of the female. The uterus is a pear-sized structure located in the pelvic cavity. It functions to receive, retain, and provide nourishment for fertilized oocyte where the embryo resides and develops. There's a body, which is the main part, and the cervix is the narrow region that leads to the vagina. Here are the uterus walls. The perimetrium is the serous outermost layer. The myometrium is the muscular middle layer. It's composed of smooth muscle. That means it's involuntary. So during labor and delivery, all those contractions happen involuntarily. That's why you hear women in comas still giving birth because their uterus does all the work. Not saying women don't, who are awake, because they do a lot too. The endometrium then is the innermost layer that's sloughed off during menstruation. The vagina extends from the uterus to the outside of the body. It receives the penis during intercourse. It allows menstrual flow. It's involved in childbirth. It contains very muscular walls and a mucous membrane. And it's incredibly acidic to keep bacteria out to try to just protect a developing fetus if it were in the uterus. The vulva, these are external female sex organs. The mons pubis is the fatty layer of skin covering the pubic symphysis. The labia majora and minora, these are folds to kind of, again, just protect any bacteria from getting into the vagina. The clitoris, equivalent to the male penis. The prepuce is where the two labia minora unite. The vestibule is the space in which the vagina and urethra are located. And you can see here the female external genitalia. This takes you through the maturation of the oocytes. And again, I'll let you guys pause the video and read through these, kind of a similar process of meiosis and then through that the sperm go through. One thing that is important and interesting to note that the primordial follicles are all arrested in development at birth. So at birth, females are born with the same number of eggs that they'll have the rest of their life. And then at puberty, those eggs start to mature oocytes to be released. Ovulation is the release of an oocyte from the ovary. It's due to luteinizing hormones secreted from the anterior pituitary. The corpus luteum is the mature follicle after ovulation. It'll degenerate if the egg is not fertilized. Females are born, like I said, with all of their eggs, oogonia, about 2 million, unlike males. About puberty, about 3 to 400,000 are left. And puberty to menopause, FSH stimulates cervical follicles to begin developing during each menstrual cycle, but only one follicle will be ovulated. Oocytes are swept into one of uterine tubes by fimbriae, and if sperm is present in the uterine tube, the oocyte could be fertilized. If fertilization occurs, then the zygote will implant in the uterus. The oocyte only lives for 24 hours, so if no sperm is present at ovulation, no zygote will develop and the oocyte will die. So female puberty usually begins between 11 to 13, completed by 16. Menarche or menarche is the first episode of menstrual bleeding. Um, you can have a lot of secondary female sex characteristics at well that enlarge, and fat will be deposited throughout the breast and the hips to prepare the body for future childbearing and feeding. You have elevated levels of estrogen and progesterone, which are secreted by the ovaries. The mammary glands are the organs of milk production in the breasts. They're modified sweat glands. They begin to enlarge during puberty for potential feeding. They consist of lobes covered by adipose. The lobes, ducts, lobules will be altered during lactation to expel milk. So here's a look at the mammary gland. You can see there's a lot of fat tissue, and a lot of this fat tissue can be a cause if there's ever breast cancer. GnRH hormone will be produced in the hypothalamus and stimulates secretion of LH and FSH. Luteinizing hormone is produced in the anterior pituitary and causes ovulation. Follicle stimulating hormone is produced in the anterior pituitary. I promise I'll take care of him. And promotes follicles in the ovaries to begin develop. Estrogen is the proliferation of endometrial cells. It causes the development of the mammary glands, control of LH and FSH secretion. It causes development and maintenance of secondary sex characteristics as well. Progesterone causes the enlargement of endometrial cells and the secretion of fluid from the uterine glands. It also causes the maintenance of the pregnancy state and the development of mammary glands. It also controls estrogen, FSH, and LH secretion, and also the development of secondary sex characteristics. The menstrual cycle is a series of changes that occurs in mature non-pregnant females. Menses is the time when endometrium is shed from the uterus, and the average is about 28 days and results from cyclical changes that occur in the endometrium. So here are the stages of the menstrual cycle. Day 1 to 5 are menses, the shedding of that inner endometrium layer. This is menstrual bleeding. Estrogen and progesterone levels are low. The follicle will begin to mature at this point. Days 6 to 13 are proliferative. The endometrium will rebuild. Estrogen levels begin to increase. Progesterone levels remain low. The follicle will mature. Day 14 is ovulation, where a mature oocyte is released due to luteinizing hormone. Estrogen levels are high. Progesterone levels will also be increasing, and the cervical mucus thins. And then days 15 to 28 are known as the secretory phase, where the endometrium is preparing for implantation. Estrogen levels decrease, progesterone levels are high, the cervical mucus thickens. And here's a look at the menstrual cycle and all the hormones that are involved, what the layer of the endometrium does as it increases or decreases, depending on if there's implantation, levels of progesterone, estrogen, the developing follicles. You can see the luteinizing hormone surge right before ovulation, and kind of how everything ties in together. Menopause then is the time when ovaries secrete less hormones and the number of follicles in the ovaries is low. The menstrual cycle and ovulation will become less regular. You'll have hot flashes, fatigue, irritability, and estrogen replacement therapy may be used to decrease the side effects. Sexual drive in females is also dependent on hormones. Testosterone-like hormones, possibly estrogen, affect brain cells and influence sexual behavior. And testosterone-like hormones are produced primarily in the adrenal cortex. Psychological factors, sensory and motor neural pathways are involved in controlling female sexual responses, and they're similar to those found in men. Here's the female sex act, which you guys can kind of read on your own. The erectile tissue within the clitoris also kind of becomes engorged with blood, a lot of mucus glands, and the stimulation of the female's genitalia during sexual intercourse normally trigger a climax or an orgasm. Um, and I'll let you guys read through the rest. Contraception, there's many methods used to prevent pregnancy, either by preventing fertilization or by preventing implantation of a developing embryo. Methods include behavioral, barrier, chemical, and surgical. Vasectomy is the ductus deferens being cut, tubes cut and tied, IUD devices, condoms, medication, and you can kind of read through all of that as well. Thanks for listening, guys.